Thunderball. Here we are. I'm kind of dreading talking about this one, and I think that's why I've put it off for so long. Not because the quality of the movie is vastly inferior to the previous movies, we will get there. On one hand, the film does turn 60 this year, so it's always nice to talk about a Bond film regardless of quality on an anniversary year. But I think it's because there's just so much to talk about in regards to Thunderball, most of it involving rights issues. It's a whole complicated situation, and to understand it, we have to dive headlong and deep into that. Be prepared, because this is going to be the longest of these videos yet. So let's talk about the controversy surrounding this movie, the one that was originally slated to be the first Bond film ever, before we deep dive into 1965's Thunderball. Okay, buckle up. This is going to be one bumpy and lengthy ride. Grab some popcorn, or listen to this and take a nap as if you're listening to a podcast to bed. I really don't care. Do whatever the hell you want, because this is going to take up a massive chunk of the video. You ready? Let's get this over with.
And here we go.
The author of the Bond novels, Ian Fleming, had long considered the possibility of bringing his literary creation of James Bond to the big screen, and had been in ongoing discussions with filmmaker Sir Alexander Korda about an adaptation of his 1954 novel, Live and Let Die, but nothing ever came to fruition. In 1954, the American CBS television network paid Fleming $1,000 for the rights to turn his first novel, Casino Royale, into a one-hour adaptation as a part of the television series Climax Mystery Theater. In June 1956, the author began a collaboration with television producer Henry Morgenthau III on a planned television series called Commander Jamaica, which would have featured a Caribbean-based character named James Gunn. After the project floundered, Fleming then used the basis of the outline of the plot for his 1958 novel, Dr. No. During 1958, Fleming and his friend U.R. Bryce began talking about the possibility of producing a film with Bond as the protagonist. At this time, Fleming had already published 6 Bond novels in the preceding 6 years, so Bryce introduced Fleming to writer and director Kevin McClory. McClory happened to be making The Boy and the Bridge at the time, which Bryce was co-financing and was being produced under a partnership with McClory called Xanadu Productions. Fleming had suggested that best fits for a Bond adaptation were his novels, Live and Let Die, or From Russia with Love. In May 1959, Fleming, Bryce, Ernest Quinio, and McClory met at Bryce's Essex home and then McClory's London home to come up with a storyline that featured an airplane full of celebrities and a female lead called Fatima Bush. McClory was fascinated with the underwater world and thought it would be best to make a movie involving water. Over the next few months, the story changed. There were 10 outlines, treatments, and scripts. Much of the attraction Fleming had towards writing with McClory soon dissipated, though, as he had gained an attraction to writing with McClory due to The Boy and the Bridge. But that movie had failed from a commercial standpoint, both critically and financially, and Fleming began to doubt McClory's ability to write a film. As a result of Fleming's disenchantment, Fleming began spending less and less time on the project. In October 1959, McClory introduced writer Jack Whittingham to the project. In November of that same year, Fleming left to travel around the world on the behalf of the Sunday Times, gathering material he would use for his 1963 nonfiction travel book, Thrilling Cities. On his travels, which took him through Japan, Hong Kong, and the U.S., Fleming met with McClory and Bryce in New York. There, McClory told Fleming that Whittingham has finished his full outline, which he claimed was ready to shoot. In December, Fleming met with McClory and Whittingham in Britain for a script conference, and soon after, McClory and Whittingham sent Fleming a script called Longitude 78 West, which really enticed Fleming, but he ended up changing the title to Thunderball. Fleming then traveled to his GoldenEye estate in Jamaica in January 1960, and McClory visited him that month. Fleming explained to McClory his intention of delivering the screenplay to the Music Corporation of America, or the MCA, with a recommendation from him and Bryce that McClory act as producer. Fleming had also told McClory that if the MCA rejected the film because of McClory's involvement, then McClory should attempt to either persuade the MCA to change their minds, back out of the deal, or open an action in the courts. However, before Fleming had left for Jamaica, he wrote to his friend and copy editor William Plumer that he was terribly stuck with James Bond. What was easy at 40 is very difficult at 50. I used to believe, sufficiently, in bonds, in blondes, and bombs. Now the keys creak as I type, and I fear the zest may have gone. Once at GoldenEye, Fleming had struggled to find fresh ideas for the plot of his James Bond novel, so he based Thunderball on the screenplay he had written with McClory and Whittingham. Fleming had previously used his former scripts or treatments to form the basis of a novel, as he had done with the 1958 novel Dr. No and the 1960 short stories For Your Eyes Only, From a View to a Kill, and Risico. Fleming followed his usual practice, which was writing 3 hours in the morning and another hour's work between 6 and 7 in the evening. He never corrected anything or went back to see what he had written, writing up to 2,000 words a day. However, Fleming felt creatively drained writing this novel, as after sending a manuscript to Plumer and including a letter saying he got bored with it, it needed drastic rewriting. In addition to Longitude 78 West, horrendous title by the way, other titles proposed for the novel included Spectre and James Bond in the Secret Service. The title Thunderball came from a conversation Fleming had about a U.S. atomic test. Although Fleming had never dated his events in the novels he wrote, John Griswold and Henry Chancellor, who had written novels for Ian Fleming Productions, have identified certain timelines based on episodes and situations within the novel series as a whole. Chancellor put the events of Thunderball as happening in 1959, while Griswold was more precise and believed the events to occur between May and early June 1959. In 1961, McClory read an advance copy of the book, and within 10 days had decided to pursue legal proceedings with the courts for breach of copyright. He and Whittingham petitioned a high court in London for an injunction to stop the publication. The case was heard on March 24, 1961, but the judge had determined that the book would be allowed to be published because the publication date was so close and 32,000 copies were already with booksellers, but left the door open for McClory to pursue further legal action at a later date. 2 weeks after the case, Fleming suffered a heart attack during a meeting with his employer, the Sunday Times. On November 19, 1963, the case of McClory and Whittingham versus Fleming, Jonathan Cape Limited, and Bryce was heard at the Chancery Division of the High Court and lasted 3 weeks. Fleming had been in poor health during the court proceedings and had already suffered 2 heart attacks while the case was running. Under advice from Bryce, Fleming settled out of court. McClory gained the literary and film rights for the screenplay, while Fleming was given the rights to the novel, although it had to be recognized as based on a screen treatment from Kevin McClory, Jack Whittingham, and the author. On settlement, Fleming did admit that the novel reproduces a substantial part of the copyright materials in the film scripts, that the novel makes use of a substantial number of incidents and material in the film scripts, and that there is a general similarity of the story of the novel and the story as set out in the said film scripts. On August 12, 1964, 9 months after the trial had ended, Fleming suffered another heart attack, this time fatal, and died at the age of 56. When the script was first drafted in May 1959, the story featured an airplane of celebrities in the Atlantic and included contributions from Fleming's friend Ernie Cuno. His contributions were ships with underwater trapdoors in their hulls and an underwater battle scene. The Russians were originally the villains, which was then changed to the Sicilian Mafia, and then changed again to the criminal organization featured throughout the books and many of the movies, Spectre. Both McClory and Fleming claim to have come up with the concept of Spectre. Fleming's biographer Andrew Lysette and Robert Sellers wrote a history about the Thunderball controversy, and both consider Fleming to be the originator of the group, with Lysette saying that Fleming proposed that Bond should confront not the Russians but Spectre, with Sellers finding Spectre Fleming's most significant contribution to the story. Fleming would go on to describe Spectre as an immensely powerful organization that featured members of SMERSH, the Gestapo, the Mafia, and the Black Ton of Peking, which was placing these bombs in NATO bases with the objective of blackmailing the Western powers for 100 million British pounds or else. Sellers notes that Fleming had used the word Spectre previously, in the fourth novel, Diamonds Are Forever, for a town near Las Vegas called Spectreville, and the cryptograph decoder from Russia with Love called the Spectre. Elements of the story and screenplay that can be attributed to McClory and Whittingham include the airborne theft of a nuclear bomb, Joe Petacci and his sister Sophie, and Sophie's death at the hands of Sophie's boss. The remainder of the screenplay was a 2-year collaboration among Fleming, Whittingham, Bryce, and Cuno. Originally meant to be produced as the first James Bond film, Thunderball was instead produced as the fourth, due in part to not having the necessary budget, but mostly in part to these legal disputes, which lasted until 2006. Bond was by 1965 a box office success, and another major reason Thunderball was chosen to be made at the time was that producers Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman feared a rival film from McClory. They had to agree to McClory's request for producer credit, with them as executive producers. Later, in 1964, the producers agreed with McClory to cinematically adapt the novel, and it was promoted as Ian Fleming's Thunderball. Even with writers Richard Maybaum and John Hopkins on board to pen the script, the screenplay is also identified as based on an original screenplay by Jack Whittingham and as based on the original story by Jack Whittingham, Kevin McClory, and Ian Fleming. To date, the novel has been adapted twice, first in 1965, then as an unofficial remake with Sean Connery as Bond, though the film is not considered an official Bond film, as it was not produced by Eon. Okay, now we can continue with the rest of the video, now that we understand exactly what went on behind the scenes with Thunderball. Broccoli's first choice for the role of Domino Derval was Julie Christie following her performance in Billy Liar in 1963. However, upon meeting with her, he was disappointed and turned his attention towards Raquel Welch after seeing her on the cover of the October 1964 issue of Life magazine. Welch became unavailable for Thunderball, though, as the same year she was cast to star in the film Fantastic Voyage. Faye Dunaway was also considered for the part and came close to signing on. Okay, wait, hold on, what? How in the world did Faye Dunaway as a Bond girl never happen? That's just baffling to me. That should be slam dunk Bond girl casting right there. Saltzman and Broccoli auditioned an extensive list of relatively unknown actresses and models, including the former Miss Italy Maria Grazia Buccella, Yvonne Monlaur of the Hammer horror films, and Gloria Paul. Eventually, former Miss France Claudine Auger was cast, and the script was rewritten to make her character French rather than Italian. Auger had managed to beat out more than 150 candidates to play Domino, but had her lines dubbed by Nikki van der Zyl in the final cut of the film. One of the actresses who auditioned for Domino, Luciana Paluzzi, later accepted the role of the red-headed femme fatale assassin Fiona Volpe. Fiona Volpe was originally named Fiona Kelly, but the surname was changed once Paluzzi was cast to reflect her Italian nationality, as the character had originally intended to be Irish. The character's wardrobe also reflects her name, as she is usually dressed in black and white. That's for Domino. Adolfo Celli was cast as the film's main villain, Emilio Largo. Celli had become a film actor in post-war Italy, then left the Italian film industry when he emigrated to Brazil, where he co-founded the Teatro Brasileiro de Comédia along with Brazilian stage greats Paulo Atran and Tânia Carreiro. He became successful as a stage actor in Brazil and Argentina, and even directed 3 films in the 1950s in South America. Celli began a new career when he played the villain in Felipe de Braca's The Man from Rio. The popularity of the film led him to be cast as Camp Commandant Battaglia opposite Frank Sinatra and Trevor Howard's Allied POWs in the 1965 drama Von Ryan's Express, which is the role that led him to be cast in his most well-known role as Emilio Largo. Count Lippi was portrayed by New Zealand actor Guy Dolman, who is best remembered as being the first actor to play number 2 in the cult classic series The Prisoner, and for playing Colonel Ross in the Harry Palmer spy series starring Michael Caine. Martine Beswick made another appearance in a Bond film after having played one of the gypsies in From Russia with Love, giving her the distinction of being the first actress to play a Bond girl twice, this time assuming the role of Bond's CIA contact in Nassau, Paula Kaplan. Philip Locke portrayed the henchman Vargas, Largo's personal assistant and chief henchman. For the role of Felix Leiter, the role was once again recast, with Rick Van Nutter replacing Cease Linder as the iconic CIA agent. Occasionally known as Clyde Rogers, Van Nutter starred mostly in Italian-produced films before starring in Thunderball. A lot of Italian connections with Thunderball. Very interesting. Of course, Lois Maxwell, Desmond Llewellyn, and Bernard Lee filled out the cast of the MI6 Brigade of Moneypenny, Q, and M. Nothing new to report on them here. Connery, of course, returned for his fourth turn as the iconic spy, but this is where his disenchantment with playing Bond started to rear its ugly head, to the point where he wasn't on speaking terms with the producers during the production of the next film. Connery was increasingly agitated, with constant intrusions from the press, and also became distracted with difficulties in his marriage of 32 months to actress Diane Salento. It got to the point where Connery refused to any journalists or photographs who followed him to Nassau any interviews, stating his frustration with the harassment that came with playing the role. I find that fame tends to turn one from an actor and a human being into being a piece of merchandise, a public institution. Well, I don't intend to undergo that metamorphosis. At the end of all of this, you had production troubles where there was a court case in which your producers couldn't even be credited as producers, and your main star is frustrated with playing the role that made him famous. Connery grew to despise playing Bond by the end of Thunderball, that he only did one interview when filming was wrapping up and refused to film a promotional TV special for NBC called The Incredible James Bond, turning down a substantial fee to appear in that promo. These little things are definitely what could make you consider Thunderball being the most trying and challenging of the Bond films up to that point. But as always, kudos for them for pulling it off with all the hardships and difficulties they experienced while filming. Guy Hamilton was invited back to direct after the success of Goldfinger, but he turned down the offer, considering himself too worn down and creatively drained after that film's production. Terrence Young, who had not returned to direct Goldfinger after directing the first two installments, returned to the director's chair for Thunderball. Coincidentally, when Saltzman had first invited Young to direct a Bond film, Young expressed interest in directing adaptations of Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball. He later stated that Thunderball was filmed at the right time, due to the film's higher budget compared to Dr. No, noting that Dr. No's smaller budget would have been a hindrance on that film and would not have yielded good results if they had filmed Thunderball in 1962. Filming commenced on February 16, 1965, with principal photography of the opening scene in Paris. Production then moved to the Chateau Denay near Dreux, France, for the fight in the pre-title sequence. Much of the film was shot in the Bahamas, as Thunderball would become known for its extensive use of underwater action sequences throughout much of the latter half of the film. The rest of the film was shot at Pinewood Studios, the Silverstone racing circuit for the chase involving Count Lippy, Fiona Volpe's RPG-based BSA Lightning motorcycle, and Bond's Aston Martin DB5, before moving to Nassau and Paradise Island in the Bahamas and Miami. Upon arriving in Nassau, McClory searched for locations to shoot many of the key sequences of the film, and used the home of a millionaire couple, the Sullivans, for Largo's estate, Palmyra. Part of the Spectre underwater assault was filmed on the coastal grounds of another millionaire's home on the island, and most of the underwater sequences had to be filmed at low tides due to sharks on the Bahamian coast. After reading the script, Connery realized the risk of the sequence with the sharks in Largo's pool and insisted that production designer Ken Adam build a plexiglass partition inside the pool. However, the panels only extended about 3 feet in height and the sharks could swim over them. As a result, in some shots, Connery got much closer to the sharks than he wanted, and because the barrier was not a fixed structure, Connery had to flee the pool when a shark passed through, or else he would have been attacked. Terrence Young has stated that the shots of Bond's frightening reactions were genuine from Connery, as he had reacted with genuine terror. Ken Adam would later go on to state, "We had to use special effects, but unlike special effects today, they were real. The jetpack we used in Thunderball was real. It was invented for the United States Army. Bloody dangerous, and it only lasted a couple of minutes. The ejector seat in the Aston Martin was real, and Emilio Largo's boat, the Disco Volante, was real. You had power boats at that time, but there were no good-sized yachts that were able to travel at 40 to 50 knots, so it was quite a problem. But by combining a hydrofoil, which we bought in Puerto Rico for $10,000, and a catamaran, it at least looked like a big yacht. We combined the two hulls with 1-inch slip bolts, and when they split, it worked like a dream. We used lots of sharks for this movie. I rented a villa in the Bahamas with a saltwater pool, which we filled with sharks and used for underwater filming. The smell was horrendous. This was where Sean Connery came close to being eaten. We had a plexiglass corridor to protect him, but I didn't quite have enough plexiglass, and one of the sharks got through. He never got out of the pool faster in his life. He was walking on water. When special effects coordinator John Steers provided what was supposed to be a dead shark to be towed around the pool, the shark, which was still alive, revived at one point. Due to the dangers on set, stuntman Bill Cummings demanded an extra fee of 250 British pounds to double for Largo's sidekick Quist, as he was dropped into the pool of sharks. The climactic underwater battle was filmed at Clifton Pier and was choreographed by Hollywood expert Rico Browning. Browning has worked on 1954's Creature from the Black Lagoon and other films. He was responsible for the staging of the cave sequence and the battle scenes beneath the Disco Volante, Largo's yacht, and had to call in his team of divers who were specialists to pose as those engaged in the battle. Voight provided much of the underwater gear in exchange for product placement and film tie-in merchandise. The ability to breathe underwater for extended periods of time was a new product that had previously been used by underwater searcher Jacques Cousteau, and using it in a movie was a new approach. Filming ceased in May 1965, when the final scene that was shot being the fight between Bond and Largo on the bridge of the Disco Volante. While in Nassau during the final days of shooting, Steers was supplied with experimental rocket fuel to use in exploding Largo's yacht. He, however, ignored the true power of the liquid, doused the entire yacht with it, took cover, and then detonated the boat. The resulting explosion shattered windows along Bay Street in Nassau, roughly 30 miles away. It all paid off, though, as Steers went on to win an Academy Award for his work on Thunderball. According to editor Peter R. Hunt, Thunderball's release was delayed for 3 months, from September until December 1965, after he had met with David Picker of United Artists and convinced him it would be impossible to edit the film to a high enough standard without being given extra time. Sean Connery performed the iconic gun barrel sequence for the first time, due to the use of the new Panavision process used in the movie. Beginning with Thunderball, the gun barrel sequence will be performed by the actor playing Bond in the movie. It is also the first instance where the dot opens up to reveal the first scene of the film. The Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger makes a return appearance in the pre-title sequence of Thunderball, engineered by Steers to be rearmed with a rear-firing water cannon, seemingly noticeably weathered, just dust and dirt, raised moments earlier by Bond's landing with the Bell rocket belt. This rocket belt, developed by Bell Aircraft Corporation and used by Bond to escape the chateau, actually worked in real life, and was used many times before and after the film for entertainment, most notably at Super Bowl I and then a scheduled performance at the 1964-1965 New York World's Fair. Bond is also equipped with a spear gun-armed water jetpack Scuba in this film, which makes sense given the film's theme of water. Designed by Jordan Klein, green dye was meant to be used by Bond as a smokescreen to escape pursuers. Instead, Rico Browning used it to make Bond's arrival more dramatic. The skyhook used to rescue Bond at the end of the film was a rescue system used by the United States military at the time. At Thunderball's release, there was a confusion as to whether a rebreather, such as the one that appears in the film, existed. Most Bond gadgets, while implausible, are often based on real-world technologies. In real life, a rebreather could not be so small because it had no room for the breathing bag, while the alternative open-circuit scuba releases exhalation bubbles, which the film device does not. It was made with two CO2 bottles glued and painted together, with a small mouthpiece attached. For this reason, when the Royal Corps of Engineers asked Peter Lamont how long a man could use the device underwater, the answer from Lamont was, as long as you can hold your breath. In 2013, Christie's auction house sold the Breitling SA watch worn by Connery in the film for over 100,000 British pounds. The watch, given to Bond by Q in the film, was also a Geiger counter in the plot. Thunderball was the third James Bond score composed by John Barry, after From Russia with Love and Goldfinger. The original title song was titled Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, taken from an Italian journalist who in 1962 dubbed 007 as Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. This song was written by Barry and Leslie Bricusse and originally recorded by Shirley Bassey. It was discarded, however, when it was realized late in the day that the track was too short for what was needed for the titles. As Bassey was then unavailable to re-record, it was later recorded by Dionne Warwick with a longer instrumental introduction. Her version was not released until the 1990s. However, Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman demanded that the track be removed from the title sequence, fearing that a title song would not work well if it did not have the title of the film in its lyrics. This whole process is unbeknownst to me. See what happens when you research things like this? You learn something new every day. Barry then teamed up with lyricist Don Black and wrote Thunderball, which was sung by Tom Jones. According to legend, Jones fainted in the recording booth when singing the song's final note because he held the note for so long. Jones went on to say, "I closed my eyes and I held the note for so long that when I opened my eyes the room was spinning." Funnily enough, country singer Johnny Cash also submitted a song for the film titled Thunderball, but unsurprisingly, it was rejected and went unused. Thunderball had its world premiere on December 9, 1965 at the Hibiya Theatre in Tokyo and opened in theaters in the UK on December 29, 1965, the first Bond movie to release in December outside of the United States. Thunderball was a major success at the box office, with record-breaking earnings. In its opening in Tokyo at one theater, it grossed a Japanese record opening day of $13,091. And the following day, it set a record one-day gross of $16,121. It went on to gross $63.6 million in the United States and became the third highest grossing film of 1965, behind The Sound of Music and Dr. Zhivago. In total, the film earned $141.2 million worldwide, surpassing the earnings of the previous three movies in the series and easily recuperated its $9 million budget. It remained the highest-grossing Bond film until the release of Live and Let Die in 1973. After adjusting its earnings to 2011 prices, Thunderball has made around $1 billion worldwide, making it the second highest-earning Bond film after 2012's Skyfall. Thunderball was also the recipient of an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects awarded to Steers in 1966. Ken Adam was also nominated for Best Production Design at the BAFTAs for the same year. The film won the Golden Screen Award in Germany and the Golden Laurel Action Drama Award at the 1966 Laurel Awards. The film was also nominated for an Edgar Best Foreign Film Award at the Edgar Allan Poe Awards. Upon release, the film received generally positive reviews. Time magazine had applauded the film's underwater sequences, but criticized the script. The New York Times praised the underwater scenes as well, and found the script to have more wit and humor than the previous films. The Sunday Times, however, remarked that the cinema was a duller place before 007. Retrospective reviews have been positive, but more mixed as well. Many agreed it didn't hold a candle to the previous three films in the series. One critic mentioned that it took forever to get going and too many long underwater sequences, which it's impossible to tell what's going on, a sentiment I actually agree with. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an 85% approval rating from critics, with a consensus reading, lavishly rendered set pieces and Sean Connery's enduring charm make Thunderball a big, fun adventure even if it doesn't quite live up to the series' previous heights. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 64 out of 100 based on 9 critics, as well as a 6.9 user rating on the site IMDb. How do I feel about Thunderball? Well, I think this movie gets worse and more boring on every rewatch. It's impressively made, for sure, especially for the time. The plot is straightforward, I love the tropical setting of the Bahamas, and I like Largo as a villain. But the film feels so much longer than it actually is, because it seems like Bond stays in locations for far too long. The underwater sequences are impressive, but dull at the same time, because what the hell is actually happening? Which one is Bond? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Why are they all wearing similar attire underwater? No wonder I can't tell who is down there, they all look the goddamn same. I forgot how long into the movie it takes to get to the underwater battle. The movie is 130 minutes long and it takes close or at an hour and 50 minutes to get the battle started. Every time I watch it, I always think it is so much earlier in the film. Or maybe not so much earlier, but at least 20 to 30 minutes earlier. I'm not going to ramble on for too long about the shortcomings I have with this movie. I have a full review up on my channel, but man, this ends up being a really dull Bond film every time I watch it, and it makes its way further and further down my Bond ranking movie list as time goes on. It makes the universal sin of being kind of boring throughout its runtime. Sean Connery also looks like he's tired of it at this point. He'd rather be anywhere else. He's going through the motions in this one, and maybe his attitude with the constant bombardment of press had something to do with that, but he doesn't play Bond in this one with the swag and charm he previously had in the 3 movies. He clearly didn't want to be here at this point, but he had to fulfill a contract and tried to make the best of it. This is even more evident when we get to the next film in the series. So that's Thunderball for you guys. I don't have much more else to say about this movie. I do appreciate the patience though for in between these videos. I know it was a long wait between the last one and this one. My original goal was to have all the Connery ones, the Lazenby one, and then back to Connery with Diamonds out by the end of the year, but I just don't think that's going to happen. I really do appreciate, though, all the views and the support you guys have given these videos. And again, please let me know if I mispronounce something in the comments, and please do it in a constructive manner. Do not berate me. I've gotten some comments like that and kind of just deleted them, but I am doing my best to pronounce every name correctly in these. I know sometimes I'm going to slip up. Everybody does. We're all humans. Give me a break. But I did enjoy talking about this one, and I can't wait to return to talk about 1967's You Only Live Twice. This is Q Branch, signing off.
Needs some more, so he gives less.